Thank you all for joining us today. We're so excited to be here together for a brand new webinar. And before we get started with the webinar, I just want to give you a few reminders for our webinar. We are recording today's webinar, and those of you who are registered will receive a link with the recording and the slides. It takes about 24 to 48 hours to get that email to you. And if you are live with us, we'd love for you to chat with us during the webinar and chat with each other as well. So be sure that you navigate to that little blue link that says all panelists and attendees so everyone who's with us can actually see and respond to your chats. Should there be some type of Zoom failure, please meet back up with us at sideletseducation.com for further information so we can continue our learning. And finally, if you are using Twitter to share out the information that Sally shares with us during the webinar, please use the hashtag that's at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, SideLetsEdChat. And I'm going to pass it on over to Anna Mattis now, who's going to introduce our presenter for today.
All right, thank you so much, Valentina. If this is your first Sidelets webinar and you're joining, welcome. My name is Anna Mattis, and I'm the Senior Consultant for World Languages here for Sidelets Education. I'm also an author of the 7 Steps to a Language-Rich Interactive Foreign Language Classroom that Sally is going to be mentioning today. So if you don't know Sally, it's my pleasure to introduce her to you. She is a current Spanish teacher in KDISD, which is in Houston. She was the 2018 Teacher of the Year for the Texas Foreign Language Association. She's been a department chair for world languages on her campus, the new teacher mentor for her campus, and we are so lucky to have her as one of our trainers and consultants for Sidelets. So maybe you too one day will be lucky enough to get her in your classrooms or in your school district training on these wonderful strategies. If you joined us a little bit earlier, you heard about my story, Sally and I, and how we met. We were both presenting at the TEFLA, the Texas Foreign Language Association conference in October of 2018. And I had just finished a presentation on these 7 steps, and somebody came into my room and said, Anna, there's a teacher next door who's training on your book, and she's fabulous. You have to go meet her. And I did, and I fell in love with her, and now you will too. And so it is, again, my pleasure to introduce Sally Barnes to you. Sally, you can take it away.
All right. Hello, everybody. Like Anna said, my name is Sally Barnes. My Twitter handle is there, @MissKeySpanish. And like Valentina said, using the hashtag 7StepsLOTE to kind of talk about what we're talking about here. But today we're going to really focus on steps 6 and 7 of the 7 steps, which is our structured conversations and structured reading and writing, and what that looks online, because as we all know as teachers, we have no idea what's coming and what the fall is going to look like. And so planning for both in-person and online is kind of the name of the game right now. So I'm actually going to be talking specifically from the 7 steps to a language-rich interactive foreign language classroom, which is this book here. A lot of the activities all the activities that I mentioned are going to come from here, and page numbers are going to come from here. However, there's another book, the original 7 steps. And as a foreign language teacher, I have found this one to be incredibly beneficial as well. I really love a lot of the activities that are here. And I think there's some overlap, but there's also a lot of different activities in each book. So if you are the proud owner of one, I really highly recommend getting the other one, because it's just going to be more activities and more practical strategies for you to use. So just know that when I'm giving page numbers, it's going to be out of this one in particular. So today our objectives, I can use structured speaking, reading, and writing strategies in online and in-person teaching, whatever is thrown at us next. We're going to be teaching with these strategies. We're participating in online speaking, reading, and writing using steps 6 and 7 from the 7 steps to a language-rich interactive foreign language classroom. So when I'm thinking about the fall and what's coming, thinking about, again, in-person and online, there's 3 pieces that really come to mind right now, especially as I'm reflecting from this last school year and how I'm going forward. So student engagement is always such a big deal for me, obviously, with any teacher, right? We want to incorporate student choice wherever we can and give kids that ownership, give them opportunities to be creative in what they love, to collaborate with each other, and just to participate frequently with us, whether we are on the computer or face-to-face. We also, some active learning techniques are always looking for new active learning techniques is always a big deal. How am I, as a teacher, giving support to my students? What am I doing to help them get to that next proficiency level? That is huge for me. Doing some slow release scaffolded activities so that kids can be creative when they're ready. Because one thing I've noticed is that if I push my kids to be too creative on their own, they are going to jump to using an online translator. And I want to see what's in their head already. I want to see what's come from our class. And so I'm pushing them really slowly so that they feel good to dive in. And then again, whether we're asynchronous or synchronous, online or not, whatever's coming, those are the things that I'm focusing on. So we're going to start with step 6, which is the structured conversations. And as an online Spanish teacher right now, I can say that that is probably one of my biggest challenges, is how do I get my kids to talk to each other, but even more importantly, listening to one another? Because even in person, my kids will talk and then not listen to what anyone else says because they're just waiting for that next moment when they're going to talk. And I really want to focus on them listening and interacting appropriately with the people in the classroom, right? I want them nodding their head. I want them saying, yeah, I agree, or whatever it might be. So some considerations I have when I think about this is, again, support from the teacher. What am I going to do to help them? Am I giving them the opportunity to choose and have their own voice, create personalized vocab outside of the vocab list that I give them? Am I giving them those opportunities for creativity? And how are we doing it? Are we online? Are we in person? Whatever it might be. So the first activity I'm talking about is on page 135 of the 7 Steps book. It's called Problem Solution Teams. And basically, students are going to be reading an article in groups and coming up with solutions to whatever problem was presented in the article. And again, they're doing this together, so they're required to talk to one another. So if I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about 2 different ways. The first one is ideal, especially for online, which is synchronous. We're all together in Zoom or Google Classroom or whatever we're in, whatever platform your district's using. So in this, students might get an article to read and discuss in a breakout room or in a separate kind of chat. And so they're reading this article together. They're learning about the problem I'm presenting. I would divide some sentence stems up amongst the kids so that each kid is going to be saying a different sentence and providing some different information based on the sentence stems. After they work together, after they read and collaborate, they're going to come back to the main room and they're going to present to the class. So if I was presenting with them, I would put a visual of what the article was talking about and then let them talk. And finally, the rest of the class would be able to ask questions afterward. I would provide a lot of question stems because I know for my own kids, that's a really big challenge for them, is creating questions on their own. And of course, I would have some ready as well. So we get a little more interpersonal rather than all presentational. If it was asynchronous, I think about Flipgrid a lot. We use Flipgrid a lot in my class. So I might create a thread for each article, and I'm going to assign 3 to 4 kids the same article, again, dividing sentence stems amongst them so they don't all produce the same sentences. And then they might post videos of themselves underneath that thread saying their information from their sentence stem. And the classmates could post videos or text to ask questions. And it would be kind of a slower paced back and forth, but a back and forth nonetheless. And maybe kids would have to research a little more or be a little more creative, and that is totally fine with me. The next one, the next activity that I'm going to talk about is inspired by the heavy amount of TV that I'm currently watching at my house, to be quite honest. So I've noticed, and I'm sure you've noticed as well, that a lot of TV shows are incorporating Zoom and kind of this type of technology in their shows. So like Jimmy Fallon is doing it, and it's hilarious. Saturday Night Live has all been through Zoom, and even Sesame Street did a Zoom, and they're doing another Zoom coming up so that kids can kind of understand maybe what they're seeing at home. So it kind of got me thinking and how I could use that idea as a way to introduce students at the start of a new school year. And the activity called Talk Show, which is on page 133 of the book, is a really awesome way to do this. So students are engaging with one another, replicating a talk show, replicating what they're seeing right now on TV. This would be much more interpersonal. It could be practiced and rehearsed, or it could be very much spontaneous, depending on what your students are ready for. So as a teacher, I would provide a variety of topics and sentence or question stems for my students, because sometimes they just need a little push to get the creative juices going, right? So there might be 1 to 2 hosts of a talk show, 1 or more guests, keeping the groups kind of small so kids get a lot of time to talk. If we're synchronous, if we're all in the same place, students could do these interviews on Zoom or whatever platform we have in front of the rest of the class. And other students could ask questions as well. Again, the support, I teach level 2 Spanish, so I need to give a lot of support to my kids for them to create those questions. Upper level students might be able to just do it on their own. And then if we were doing asynchronous, perhaps students are recording Zoom or class or small group conversations, and the class could go in and view afterwards. And that would look a little more like this little American Idol piece here, smaller groups talking, and then we as the outsiders just kind of get to watch and observe. The last one that I'm going to talk about is QSSA, and there are actually webinars already about QSSA, so I'm not going to go into it in huge detail. I highly recommend you look it up if you're not familiar with it. But QSSA is a really simple strategy that is very structured in asking students questions and having a lot of students respond to practice that speaking in class. I have found that so many of my students benefit from this, whether they are students who just really need that structure, to my really, really highly gifted students who just like to know what's coming and like to be able to prepare. Truly, so many of my students have benefited from this. So the first thing, the cue, I'm going to ask a question to my class, an open-ended question. I'm going to give them a signal that they can use to tell me that they're ready to respond. And I'm going to wait. And that is awesome, especially for new teachers or any teachers who need some help with wait time. The signal is amazing because it's built-in wait time. You're going to wait for that signal. You're going to give them sentence stems so that they know how to start their complete sentence. You're going to be asking them to share with each other first. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to randomly choose on some kids and I'm going to assess. That doesn't necessarily mean a test, but I'm just going to see where everybody is at. So this is how it looks like in my classroom, and this is how I actually did it online. So the question is something obviously in the target language, like, what did you do today during your free time? I gave them a stem during my free time, and the signal is thumbs up. So if we're on Zoom, I'm waiting to see almost everybody, if not everybody, give me the thumbs up. Then for my class, and this is for me specifically, this might be where you change it a little bit, but for the share, I actually have them type their answer in the chat box, because when I assess, I always tell my kids that they can either tell me their answer that they came up with, or they could read somebody else's answer that they like better. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get them comfortable with sharing anything. There's a lot less reluctance when you can share someone else's answer. And I also want to hear the best of the best answers. So if a student reads somebody else's, it's amazing. I'd love to hear what that other student has to say. So the reason I love this is that there's a lot of time to process because I'm waiting for that signal. They can get some support from peers in this. And then again, they're speaking in the target language about a topic that I'd like for them to cover. If it's asynchronous, this is how I did it. Again, replicating what I do in the classroom as closely as I could. So the question and the stem are the same. My signal, this was actually done on Canvas, which is like an online classroom. And I did it in a discussion post. So they had to like the post to show that they understood the question. If they didn't understand, they were asked to message me privately so I could help them. Because again, this is asynchronous. We're not kind of in the flow of a conversation. And I had them like the post because that's what they do in my class. They give me a thumbs up, and I thought it's similar. So again, they're going to type their answer in the discussion board, and then I linked a Flipgrid, and they posted a video of them reading their answer and 2 other students' answers. And again, I did this intentionally because I really wanted to get them to talk in third person and say he and she rather than just I. Pushing them to talk about other people. So that asking them to give 2 other students' answers helped me with that. And then I gave them a bonus. If they could ask or answer a question, that's even better. Okay, so now I'm going to go on to structured reading and writing, and I have a few activities again coming from the same book. But basically what I'm thinking is, how are we supporting students' interpretive reading or presentational and interpersonal writing when we're online? I know I can't just throw an article out at my kids and say, read it. That's not going to work for so many of my students. That's not what I would do in class. So what am I doing online to help them? So again, considerations, support from me, giving students a lot of choice, knowing that they'll be more invested in the assignment if they have a choice in it, giving them personalized high frequency vocab. If a student looks up a word and is using it all the time, I love that. If I didn't give it to them, I love that they're using it. So I'm giving do that. Opportunities for creativity, and again, being synchronous or asynchronous online. So the first one is on page 162. This is a letter or email response. In class, students would actually be writing a letter to another student, and there'd be a little back and forth here where they're writing and asking and answering questions. Online, I'm taking it more as a practice for the AP test, where they have to respond to an would do is go to College Board and get some of their release tests. Anna and I actually were on College Board not that long ago looking at some of these release tests, and so many of the email sections for our curriculum at least mirrored what my students were able to do in levels 1 and 2, even at the AP test level, right? Like I could make it work. So I would go there first, also because then it's done and I don't have to write it, or I could write an email myself on a relevant topic, giving 2 to 3 embedded questions. I want my kids to answer questions when they're responding to this email. What I ask my students to do is respond to the email, and I would ask them to highlight any word that they had to look up, because that's really important to me to see what words they needed, especially as I go back and revisit what my vocab list is. I'm going to give them sentence and question stems so that they can have some practice and some guidance in how to respond to the email. And then some format reminders. So on your screen, you see that little hand. I have a big anchor chart in my classroom that is this hand, and it's practice for the structure of the email that they have to do on the AP test. So even at levels 1 and 2, I'm trying to hammer this idea in their heads. They're really good at it. So reminding them that it's a formal tone. They can't say, hey, what's up as their entrance, right? As their greeting. They need to say good morning or good afternoon. They need to make sure that they're giving that formal greeting, dear so-and-so, or whatever it might be. And they're going to be I'm asking them to give and to contribute to the conversation with details and some elaboration. So I don't want them to just be surface level. I want them to dive a little deeper and then ask questions, ask for clarification, ask for more detail, ask for more information. I want them to respond to those questions in the email and then come up with some of their own. And then of course, giving a formal goodbye. This isn't just like a, hey, see you later, whatever it might be. I want them to be very formal about it. So I give them those reminders in this activity. The next activity is one of my favorites called Writing Window. And I love it because it has embedded student choice in it. And I'm using visuals, which is really good for language learners. I'm giving them the opportunity to be as creative as they can or use vocabulary that they're very familiar with from class. So this is an example. You would want to give diverse pictures so that students could choose. My one picture here where the man is climbing up the mountain, that would be one of many pictures that they could choose from. I'm going to give them sentence stems to write about, common verbs, words, and phrases that they might need. And I ask my kids to highlight words they looked up or borrowed. So you can see in that little window what I'm going to ask my kids to do. I'm going to be asking them to write out what they see, hear, and smell as if they were in the image. They're going to story tell as if they're sitting in that image. If that's them climbing the mountain, or they're watching their friend climb the mountain, or whatever it might be. They're going to list out adjectives that describe the experience, list out verbs that describe what's going on, and then any other words that they might need. So now they have these 4 lists of ideas. Then they can use those sentence stems down in blue to create a really good paragraph or 2 that narrates what is happening in this picture. And again, it's as if they're experiencing it. And since they got to choose, I'm hoping that they'll give a lot of detail because hopefully they chose something they'd want to write about or they'd want to do or they have experience with. So this is a really great one, especially as you get into narration and talking in first person. This is beautiful. Depending on the level of your kids, that'll tell you kind of how much support you need to give with vocabulary or sentence stems or what else it might be. This is like actually my favorite activity, I think, that I'm going to share with you today. It's called Raft, R-A-F-T. It stands for something. We'll get there in a second. But basically, it's the epitome of student choice for presentational writing. And that is why I love this so much. So Raft stands for role, audience, format, and topic. So I'm going to give my students this table of all these different things that they could write about. So there's plenty of diverse prompts. In this activity in particular that you see on your screen, this is all surrounding the restaurant unit that we have, restaurants and food. So that's the topic that I'm covering. I do give them sentence stems. I give them common verbs and phrases. And again, I ask them to highlight words they needed to look up when they're writing. But basically, the student gets to read through all of these and decide, which do I want to write about? Which do I prefer? So maybe you have a student who wants to become a business owner. So maybe they would choose the third option. Restaurant owner is their role. They're writing to prospective investors. They're writing an email, and they're describing their business plan for a future restaurant. So they get to create their own restaurant. Or maybe you have a student who really likes to complain. And so they would be the second to last one, where they're a customer, they're writing to a restaurant manager, and they're complaining because they had a terrible time. And those are really fun to read too. On the teacher side of it, it means that I'm not reading the exact same paragraph over and over and over again, because my students got to choose which one they wanted to do. So it's way more fun for me when I'm assessing them if they get to have this choice. The last one that I'm going to share is actually for listening, listening practice. And I have used this in my classroom religiously over the last couple of years. And I'll explain how I follow it up in class. But I've noticed that online, I use programs like Edpuzzle, which are wonderful, and I love them for interpretive listening. But I find that this one, I really get to see my students' true proficiency level and what they can understand with this activity. So I'm going to give them a video, and maybe I give them a couple so that they get to choose. And they're going to be filling out essentially a graphic organizer with what they understood. And through that, you know, they're not hunting and pecking for information because it's multiple choice and they only have to listen for that one word. I'm gathering what they really, truly absorbed from the video. And to be honest, I don't care how many times they watch it. I just want to hear what they knew. So this is what the graphic organizer looks like. It's very simple. It would be in the target language. So I'd ask my students to watch the video so that they could answer those 5 questions. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. The why and how is the pushing it for my level 2s, right? That is the getting some more information than just the surface level. So that one's always a challenge. Then I've got the 3 boxes on the side. So asking them what the main idea was, details that support that main idea. And I always tell my students that details don't necessarily have to be words you heard. It could be body language, it could be gestures, it could be what's around the person. Those are all details that support the main idea in real conversation. And so I'm asking them to do that even just when watching this video. And the last one I love because it's their opinion, what was interesting to them. So they can come up with whatever they thought was interesting. So they really can't be wrong. Again, these would be in the target language, and I'd be asking them to fill it out in the target language. When I'm doing it online, I have it look more like a table, and I just ask them to copy and paste the table into a text box or a Google Doc, however I'm doing it. And then they can type in their answers from there. So one more thing, sorry about this, to follow up. So in my classroom, because I get so excited about this, because listening was always my biggest struggle as a language learner. So if I get to help people, I'm super pumped about it. So to follow this up, what I would do is I would give my students a set of questions that I might actually give them as multiple choice, but I'm going to give them as free response this time. So they've watched the video, they've filled out this graphic organizer. Now here are 5 very specific questions. Can you answer any of these? Did you hear any of this? Did you get any of these 5 questions? Did you hear the answers when you were listening? And they would answer what they could, and then we'd watch one more time as a class and see if they could catch any of the rest of the questions. So now I'm getting that targeted, that very targeted feedback from them, right? Did they understand these 5 things? But I also get to see what they got in general. So some other favorite activities in this book our pass along papers. QSSA is explained even more in here, which is wonderful. Say it another way, roving paragraphs, T-chart, pair, defend, personal dictionary, and read, write, pair, share it. They are some of my favorites that I use in my classroom. Personal dictionary I actually use online too, because it really helps my students a lot. So if you have this book, I highly recommend you go and check out these activities. I'm sure you've already looked through the book if you do have it, but I find that sometimes I forget about a really wonderful activity, and then I'm reminded in training or whatever it might be, and I go back and I'm like, oh, that's right, I had bookmarked that and I just totally forgot about it. So I highly recommend those. And then some other resources that are really helpful in this book. On page 66, there are a ton of sentence stems for summarizing, sharing, justifying, accessing prior knowledge, and elaborating. And they're actually done in multiple languages already. So you don't even have to recreate the wheel. You don't have to worry about translating or anything like that. They're already done for you, and they're really wonderful sentence stems. On page 76, you'll find some randomization techniques. So ways that you can make sure that everyone in your class is participating, more than just that one kid that raises his or her hand really fast every time you ask a question. Ready response signals on page 88. Those are really helpful for me because that is the one thing that I always struggle with is asking and actually waiting for everyone to give me their signal that they're ready. So I love page 88 because it gives me a lot of different ideas for doing that. So I can kind of spice it up. And I will tell you that even my high schoolers, like at first, they're kind of like, I don't want to do that. And maybe they don't want to, they get over it very fast. And it ends up being kind of a comfort thing, knowing that I'm going to wait for everybody. As we do it more and more, they get really into it. And the last one are paragraph frames. There are multiple pages of paragraph frames that you could give to your students so that they can create a really well-written, well-supported paragraph on a variety of topics. So I truly love those. And they're all here in this book. Some of them are also in the original 7 steps, but also remember that these go together really, really well. And I highly recommend having both of them. At that point, my piece is over, and I'm really proud of myself because I always get really into this stuff and I get way too talky. And so I really tried to rein it in, and I feel like I did a pretty good job. But thank you guys. We have a ticket out and then a couple more pieces of information, but that's all that I have.
Sally, thank you so much for sharing that wonderful information with everyone. If you want to go ahead and show your ticket out while we wait. And now I did have a couple of questions for you. So if you, on the spot, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go. Now, your very first activity, you talked about when you give an article, you wanted to divide sentence stems to the students. And the question was, are you assigning those stems to students at varied proficiency levels, or do you have a different way of how you divide those sentence stems?
That is a lovely question. Okay, so I am very strategic. I know I assess my kids quite frequently. And so I know kind of where they're standing. So I will strategically give higher level sentence stems to students who can handle it. And I will give more supported sentence stems to the students who need that extra support. So I do give very specific ones to specific students based on their proficiency level. However, if a student is kind of teetering on the edge, right, like they're sitting at a novice high, but I know I could push them, I'm going to give them a couple of advanced ones too to see what they can do with it. And afterwards, I might tell them like, hey, you got a couple of really difficult ones and you did an awesome job. So yes, I am strategic with how I divide those based on proficiency level.
Perfect. Now, another question that we had was, so during QSSA, you had this great option that a student can share someone else's response. Mm-hmm. And so she just wanted to know if you have any other ideas of how you could structure that response if it's someone else's. Is it just my friend Anna says, or did you have any more thoughts on that?
So again, it's kind of based on the proficiency level. So in the beginning, I will give them a sentence stem that's like, this person's name said that they do this, right? So I'm forcing them to go in third person, because what I've noticed is that if I ask my students to just read someone else's, they will read that other person's and they'll say, I am doing this, right? They'll say it in first person because that's how their classmate wrote it. So I do ask them, I give them a sentence stem to get them to do it in third person. I will challenge students towards the end of the year to find somebody that they did something similar to, and then ask them to say that we did this, right? Or this person and this person, they did this. So now I'm going more into the plural aspect. I am very, again, strategic about that because I don't want to overwhelm students, but that is a way to kind of spice it up a little rather than just he or she said something, to ask them to find some commonalities between other people, whether it's them and a classmate or two classmates, to do the we and they.
I gotcha. That makes perfect sense. Okay, the last question that we had, somebody asked if you could elaborate on roving paragraph frames just a little bit. I think that would be a perfect, I know, it's the best. It's the best activity, everyone. The best.
It is the best activity. I use roving paragraph frames all the time. I'm getting red thinking about it because I love it. I honestly love it so much. So basically what it is you're giving your students a general topic, right? Why is it important to exercise was the last one I did. It was the day before spring break. It was my last day of school. And I asked them, why is it important to live a healthy lifestyle? I think that's what the question was. So I'm going to ask them to partner up randomly using a variety of randomization techniques. So I might say for the first one, go find someone who's the same height as you, right? So you're going to go find a partner, and I'm going to give one sentence stem. And I'm going to tell them, as a partnership, using that one sentence stem, create one sentence together. And each of them have a note card, and they're going to write that one sentence down. Right? So they each have the same sentence written. Then I'm going to play some music because that's how I do my partnership. So they're just going to walk around aimlessly. When the music stops, they turn to whoever's closest. That is their new partner. I ask them to read the sentence that they both already have on their note card. And now I'm going to give them a second sentence stem. And together they have to write a new sentence that doesn't repeat anything that's already been said, that gives some more support, right? So in level 2, I'm giving them like connector words, simple transition words that I'm trying to get them to use more and more. So we keep doing this until they have 4 to 5 sentences. The last one is almost always in conclusion or finally, to really wrap up the paragraph. But ideally, by that time, they've heard so many ideas and so much language about the same topic. And I always ask them not to repeat what their partner has already said, right? So nobody's paragraph should have any repeated information, really. It should always be new. And it requires them to really think deeply about the topic, especially by the time they get to like the 3rd or 4th sentence. They've used up their surface level or the first thoughts that come to mind. Now they really have to dig deep to figure out what more they can say. And I love it so much. They create wonderful paragraphs. And I love when a student who's teetering on the edge is partnered up randomly with someone who's slightly above them, and they can work together to create this really good sentence. And I just think, oh man, with that kind of peer collaboration, is that going to push them? Is that going to push them to write like that or to speak like that in the future? It's my favorite. I love that activity so much.
Thank you so much. I agree. My passion and fervor for that activity is so fantastic. I'm actually going to be training a group of teachers online next week in Tyler, and we're going to do it online.
Nice.
I don't know how it's going to work, but it's going to be awesome. So you had some amazing answers. Everybody's really looking forward to trying Raft and QSSA and Talk Show and increasing their wait time. And then for those of us that have the book, they're just looking forward to re-exploring some of these activities that you brought about. And so thank you guys so much for your responses. Before we close out, I wanted to just make a quick word about Sally and I. We are both going to be training-ish this summer, kind of, online. If you are somebody, I'm seeing a lot of districts that we've trained in, we are converting our LOTE training online. So whether you need it for the first time or you're wanting a follow-up training, we have both, and we're able to do a lot of these activities for both a synchronous and an asynchronous learning environment. So be sure to reach out to us if that's something that your district is interested in. And then now you can go ahead. There you go. Perfect. So if you're new to us, on the 1st and 3rd Tuesday of every month, Valentina holds a Sidelets Ed chat. It is foundable. That's not a word, guys. You can find it at our hashtag SideLetsEdChat. And we also have a blog that we've been publishing posts semi-regularly, almost weekly since the last 2 months or so. And we have a mix of our consultants as well as outside authors and teachers and consultants that just share wonderful strategies for the ELL and world language community. So please sign up for that. And then if you want to go ahead, we have some more things to share with you. Upcoming webinars, we have 2 more. Now, some of you have been really faithful and you've been with us since March. We have 2 more left in our upcoming free webinar series. On June 2nd, Dr. Monica Lara will be doing her La Práctica del Dictado. That one will be in Spanish. And then finally, on Thursday, June 4th, Mary Martin will be talking about reflecting on parent and family engagement. So after those free webinars, we have, if you go to the next one, I believe, some upcoming conferences for you. Now for these, you can find more information on our website, sideletseducation.com. We have actually happening today is some sheltered instruction in math. You might have missed out on that. But next week, June 3rd and 4th, Dr. Michelle Izquierdo is going to be doing a conference based on Pathways to Greatness for ELL newcomers, all about culture for our newcomers. That's June 3rd and 5th. And then Carol Salva, who is my dear co-author on the book Boosting Achievement, will be doing a training for our students with limited and interrupted formal education on June 12th. So you can get more information about that on our website. And I believe, yes, that's it. So again, there's just some ways that you can reach out to us, stay in touch with us. We're so excited for everybody that was here today. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We're always here to help. And we thank you and hope you have a wonderful weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Sally. Thank you,
Thank
Anna.
you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.